You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators in this space every week. Ivan, kick us off.
Hi, I'm Ivan Zach, and I'm happy to introduce you guys to Michael Hyman. We're going to talk about innovative business models. Michael comes with the background working at AOL, Amazon, and Microsoft. He's the current CEO of Petabyte.technology, and they have a product, Rhapsody. He holds a degree of Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from Princeton University. On the personal side of things, hobbies include oil painting, running, bird watching, and Peloton. I remember you had a conversation with Jeremy about it.
Absolutely.
He also sits on the board of the Seattle Opera. Very interesting. Fun facts: he grew up on a small farm, avid bird photographer. He has a Russian wife, which is a very interesting story that Michael told me about. He likes trying to learn new languages, and his parents are professional artists, so he's a black sheep of the family. Michael, welcome to the show. Super excited to interview you today. We met at Orlando at the VMX, and you showed me Rhapsody. It was pretty interesting. It is a practice management system, but we're talking about innovative business models. But I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to start with, how did you end up in veterinary industry working in AOL, Amazon, and Microsoft?
Well, I thought for once in my life I should do something my mom would understand.
Okay. Interesting.
In part, actually, I ended up in the industry through the advice of one of the VCs who had backed several of my other companies. And I really love working with VCs because they spend their careers surveying industries, seeing what's interesting, what's hot, where there's opportunities. And he pointed me into the pet space, took a look, and I got super excited. I went to VMX as kind of my intro. And I was fascinated by it being a super large industry, but in which a lot of the techniques that we would use when I was running, let's say, $1 billion industry, not at all present. So huge, but problems with data, problems with software. A lot of veterinarians were running on 30-year-old software without the ability to look at what's basics, like where's my cash flow? And should I be doing this with inventory? And am I charging properly? And why am I still running on 20-year-old servers sitting underneath a dish of cat food? So thought maybe we could come in and take some of the techniques I've used in building super high scale software and bring it to this space. And the more I looked at the space, the more excited I got, both by looking at the existing software that was out there and also talking to veterinarians who just seemed like really nice people with a hard, stressful job, trying to make it through the day, and thought, let's go make some great software, make their life easier, and maybe all of us can win.
I love that. That's, I like the thing you said. I want to do something that my mom understands. We had a rule in my previous company in SmartFlow. Usually in our meetings, I would say that we use the grandmother's rule. It's basically, you have to explain it in the terms so my 94-year-old grandmother will understand it. So to just explain the complex things in a simple way.
Yeah, we used to do that at Microsoft as an interview question, and it was always a trick question because he'd say, explain it so my grandmother understands. And they'd say, well, first, grandma, you have to plug in the computer, and you go through this whole thing where they're trying to be super polite. And then you say, yeah, by the way, my grandmother's a Nobel Prize winning physicist. And like, so the whole trick is to start by getting grounded to see who you're really dealing with.
What's your grandmother's background? That's interesting.
Exactly. What's the audience?
That's awesome. So you mentioned a couple of things that you're doing new in Rhapsody. What is the innovative business model that you're after?
The business model is super different. So when we took a look at the space, one of the things that we realized is we're relatively small and scrappy, let's say, compared to the super large players in the space. So we needed to have a model that would let us cut through the noise and be different. And there's a number of things that we did. We looked at the barriers to entering. So if I'm working on an existing product, So I'm working with an existing PIMS, and you can pick any of them. There's going to be a challenge to migrate to a new system, and typically there's a pretty hefty cost associated with doing so. A lot of the companies put in lock-in contracts, and they're adding fees on top of fees on top of fees. And we thought, let's just do things completely differently. So our core pricing model, although we do have other models, but what most of our customers are using is our model where we provide payment services. And so basically, you run all of the credit card transactions through our payment services, and that's how we make our money. And we're not doing it with some type of crazy exorbitant rate. So if every clinic has to pay for credit card fees one way or another. Most clinics don't have a good understanding of what their fees are and are paying far more than they think. So we also help them understand what the total cost is. But instead of paying the bank for, let's say, 2.5%, 3.5% credit card fees, plus your software vendor, let's say $500, $1,000, $1,500 a month, plus pay your on-site IT staff to maintain your decrepit server that's sitting under a dish of cat food. Let's just simplify everything. And our model is it's a click EULA, so pay as you go. There's no contract, there's no lock-in, which we believe means we have to work harder to keep the business. And secondly, you pay by what's occurring with your credit cards. If you're having a great month, we do well. If you're having a slow month, let's say a pandemic hit and you slow down for the first month, well, our fees are backed off according to your revenue. So everybody is aligned and all of our interests are together. So the end result is the total cost of ownership for our clients is much lower. And we look at clinic after clinic, and it saves people money, and it's something they have to do anyway. As part of that, there's also advantages as well. So you can't see it off of audio, obviously, but we built software around a cool Bluetooth Wi-Fi enabled device. When you have an invoice, it pushes directly to the device. You don't fat finger charges. You don't have front desk discounts that you might not be aware of. Everything is pushed. Everything is tracked. And you can carry the device to the back room. So let's say that you were just dealing with a difficult event, maybe an end-of-life event for a loved pet. You don't have to charge the person who is obviously quite upset in front of everybody else. Or maybe you have a complicated procedure and the person's got a bunch of questions, like, what on earth is a blocked cat surgery? They don't have to ask it in front of 20 other people in the front room. You can do all of the charging, all the transactions, all the discussing in the back. Or in the times of COVID, and it supports taps and dips and swipes and wipes, and I always call them chips and dips. So you can go out to the car and hold the device outside of the car, and the person can wave their Apple Pay device or they can wave their credit card, and you never have to touch each other. So there's just a lot of really nice advantages to it. So it's tightly integrated. So we look at it as kind of a double win. We're able to make money to drive the business while not having to charge the clients directly and letting it be a cost saving as well as a charge cost win.
That's awesome. You reminded me about with not explaining in the exam or in the waiting room what is the block cat surgery. I saw this meme somewhere on the internet where the person comes out, or the nurse comes out of the exam room, and she says, due to privacy concerns, we're not naming people names anymore. So lady with the severe diarrhea, please come into the exam room.
Exactly. Yeah. How long have you had that strange rash?
Exactly. Yeah. So I looked at your product in January. You told me that you were sort of under a year of development, which I don't believe you. And I'm sorry, because I've seen products, 5-7 years into it, and they had way less features. And it doesn't confuse me how fast you can develop things, because I know where your developers are. But to write requirements, to have the product so fast out to where it is right now, how do you do it? Who's on your team? And how long did it take you from the nice conversation with VCs to where you at? Not today, but let's say to that January, because you were already quite advanced.
So for January, the company had officially took in its seed round of funding in February. So we're under a year at the time that I met you. So we really do develop super quickly. I would say there's parts to the secret sauce besides having a great team of developers in your hometown, which obviously is a win. But one of the things that is perhaps unique about our company is a lot of us have worked together for a long time. So the president of the company, Tim Malman, I've worked with him for a decade. My VP of engineering, Paul Grinchenko, worked with him for 15 plus years across multiple companies. Some of our engineers, same thing, 15 years, 10 years. Our VP of product I work with for, it's probably 5-6 years at this point. VP of finance, a dozen years. So, and same thing on the veterinary side. So Alex, co-founder and COO, has worked with Katie, our VP of sales, for a dozen years. So instead of trying to build a company from scratch with people that have never worked together, we've got a company that we built from scratch with people that have worked together under intense pressure, building software and startups in large companies. So that means that we kind of know how to work with each other. We don't have the same ego fights and troubles that a lot of companies might go through. And we've built software under extreme pressure in the past, so we just kind of know how to crank it out. Now, obviously, every company makes mistakes, and so we've made a ton of mistakes together that we now avoid, and we have to be creative and make new ones. But I think having that core group of people that's worked together, building startups before, building super complicated software makes a difference. As well as, our engineers have come from places like me, from Amazon and Microsoft, and from working on super high scale software. So, we've built software that has been attacked by foreign governments that speak languages that you and I speak.
Foreign governments.
That's right.
Yeah.
We've built software that has been under load of having to handle millions of transactions a second. So it means that we have this background of building stuff in a cauldron that's far more complicated than the space that we're in now. At least I hope it'll be a long time before foreign governments start to attack us. And and I long for the day that we can have millions of transactions a second flowing through the veterinary space.
Likely. Russians are not that interested in Fluffy's diarrhea today. I don't think they have far worse problems right now. So.
Exactly. And we just have a great group of people. Our head of product, Justin, as I mentioned, worked with him for a long time, and he's very, very sharp guy. Our people in the medical space, Kim and Katie and Lacey and so forth, all really good people. And part of what we've done as well to try to move quickly is built a really good company culture. So it's intense, it's a startup, but we have also a real diverse group of people inside the company. We have, I'd say, 85% of the company is bi or trilingual. We have people ranging in age from 20s to 60s. We have people from all types of different backgrounds. We are over in the US, we're about 70% female. So it's just not your typical software startup. And I think that's also very advantageous because it means we're bringing in ideas from people all across the spectrum. And when things go well or things go poorly, just having that different type of space, I think, is super valuable. And for me, it's a real pleasure. I came home from one of our offsites back when we could travel and get together and everybody could be in person. And I shared this story with you as well, which was, I said to my wife, something must be wrong because I've been in the large corporate environments. So we just came off of our offsite. Everybody likes each other. Everybody's aligned around the mission. Everybody's working together to make our customers' lives better. What on earth is going on? This is not corporate life that I know. So I think having that alignment around mission is also valuable moving quickly. As you get into larger and larger corporations, sometimes you drift from that, where in startups you tend to have maniacal focus, and that helps. But also we're just crazy and we work super hard and we like to build great software.
That's awesome. Yeah, so Michael, a couple questions for you. The first is, how did you guys stumble upon the business model? Did you take it from somewhere else? How did that come to pass? And then a second part to that question, how do people perceive it? You said you have a couple of other business models as well. So interested, for you to dive into all of those three questions, because I'm sure there's some listeners that probably would like to know those things.
So how did we come up with the model? I would say it was a mix of both trying to be disruptive, looking for how we could reduce friction and try to get to a spot where the clinics are winning and we're aligned with veterinarians. So, a lot of times you see businesses that the veterinarian is their client, but not their friend. So, they're like, how can I extract as much money as possible from the veterinarian and make their life harder? Where we wanted to flip that to how can we help the veterinarian's bottom line and ideally become a partner with them. So we thought this would be really useful there. And we also took a look at what's going on in the human space. So, there's companies in the human space that drive off of a payment services model. Often, some slight differences. We looked at a lot of different charge structures. Our VCs pointed us again at a variety of companies that we looked at as well. And we just thought that this model was very, very clean and could resonate and would help us get out of the old school contract negotiation, send somebody in a suit to the practice to sit down and do a hard sell. And we wanted it to be much more cooperative and more of a partnership. And so that's kind of what drove it. Being a scrappy startup, we take risks. Is it something where we go to every clinic and they say, "Oh, amazing, you're saving me money"? Certainly when we started off, the first reaction that we tended to have is, "Okay, you must be ripping me off somewhere. What evil thing are you doing?" And then as we, spent time, we built up what we call the TCO model. And we found that that's been very helpful. So instead of just looking at it as, look, this is how it's working and this is going to help you, we are happy to take merchant services statements from potential clients. And many veterinarians don't understand all the complexities of how to read them. And we'll analyze the statements and we'll do a true total cost of ownership. So here, if you take a look at your merchant statement today and you look at your annual fees, your monthly fees, your transaction fees, your interchange fees, your surcharge fees, your mixed rates for the different types of cards, here is what your true monthly cost is, here's what our cost is, and here's what the delta is. So we try to be really transparent and upfront. And in part because, we do get people say, "Oh, you're ripping me off, you're charging 3 times what I'm currently paying." But not physically possible because the banks are not going to pay you to run their credit card services. There is a fixed interchange rate. Well, it's variable, but there's an interchange rate. Nobody pays below interchange rate. We know what all of the different providers are charging. So there's this room. And as you look at it and you take into account all the different places that there's hidden fees, typically it ends up that we're incredibly competitive. For other models, certainly we are open to other models for going towards more of a traditional SaaS fee. This can be applicable for smaller clinics where they're doing such low dollar volume that we wouldn't make any money, or it could be applicable for larger groups who may have a financial arrangement that they feel pretty set on. But having said that, we do find, in fact, the larger groups tend to be very open to the model just because they see the cost savings. They have departments and they know that look at the finances. They're very aware of what the charge structures are, and they see huge value in being able to kind of centralize and have a known factor across all the hospitals. So outside of that kind of initial, "Oh gosh, you must be doing something evil somewhere," as people start to see the transparent model, they start to see the numbers, they start to understand, we find it's been really eye-opening and very positive with clients. But it's different. It's absolutely different than what anybody else is doing.
How do you find the consolidators react to this pricing? Because sometimes they can negotiate, different rates, and I guess that's what you mentioned, that you can sort of have a different business model with them. But what is the general reaction? Is it different from the single veterinarians, or is it same sort of, oh, you're evil, and then they're kind of slowly understanding what's the model like?
Generally, for the consolidators, they often have more sophistication around the finances. So the consolidators tend to be more excited about the model because for them, they are always looking at how can I control and centralize cost structure and get advantages. And the consolidators in general tend to be more aware of all of the hidden fee structures associated with some of the merchant transactions. So they look at it and we'll have consolidators that work with us and say, well, I've negotiated with 5 banks in the last month, and you're giving me a really good deal because we're not charging a lot of the things that the other merchant services charge, and because we're saving them back-end expense. All of the charges are flowing automatically. They're not double keying. They're not printing out an invoice, handing it to the front desk, who goes to payment terminal, types it in, flips the 9 and the 6. Suddenly the surgery's got a $300 discount, and at the end of the month paying an accountant to go through and try to reconcile. It's all automated and tracked, and just looking at that as well as how the rate structure works, they're super excited.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, one of the things that came up for me, Michael, when you were explaining this is just the complexity around your sales cycle. So, one, you've got a beautiful practice management software that, is probably challenging to sell in some cases. And then you've got this secondary sale that you've got to pitch them on, which is helping them understand something that typically they've probably ignored. And so has that been a challenge as you guys try to go to market, or has it been a pretty smooth adventure?
I would say that has been a relatively smooth adventure. Obviously we're a flexible startup company. There's lots of ways to make deals work. Another thing that we've done that's been very different and innovative is because we built so much automation around migration, when a clinic is thinking about switching over to us, we will, in many cases, run our migration tool and give them a sandbox where they're playing with their actual data. So they can test out our product live very quickly with their clients, their patients, their labs, and so forth. And that's been really helpful as well, because then they can feel it real and get involved in the process. So that's helped a bunch. What I would say is the challenges tend to be more around just the difference of, let's say, pencil versus cloud or client server versus cloud. It's just, you're operating on a browser, you're operating from a tablet, you're operating from a mobile phone, and getting used to some of those differences of flows can be, it's just different. If you have been sitting on Cornerstone or Avamark or Impromed or any of these products, and you've used it for the last 15 years, you've got this mind memory where you're automatically searching for the Shift Alt F1 key or whatever it might be.
Print screen.
Yeah, print screen, exactly. For us, you're shifting towards clicking on stuff with a mouse. You're able to log in from home if you feel like it. So we also get things like, please make sure my employees can't log in from home. Like, okay, it's a different set of issues that we're dealing with. And that tends to be more the friction point that we're seeing compared to, let's say, the price model or the automation of the migration and some of the other things.
That should be a filter. If someone asks, can you make the employees not logging in? That should be a disqualified as customer. You shouldn't just don't sell to them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just such a, it's a different perspective. And certainly you can see in the world of COVID, having to have employees drive to the clinic and sit next to each other gathered around the client server machine is not quite as nice as being able to say, look, you can do your soaping from your car on a tablet. You can do your soaping at home. Whatever, you can juggle a family life along with your work life. It's it's different. So it'll take some time, but that's where the world is going to go. And I think COVID's going to help accelerate some people move in that direction.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I read a quote from Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, this week, and he said, "There's been 20 years of digital transformation happen in 2 weeks." So I think,
Yes.
it's a pretty interesting quote. Man, we're running out of time. I've got a bunch of other questions that I want to ask you. I'm going to ask you one additional question, which is just a simple one. But Michael, like besides everything that we spoke about, what are the key takeaways from the sole practitioner or the vet groups out there that are looking at practice management systems they should really know about Rhapsody before they make that decision?
It's super cool. It's different. We would love people to take a look at it, try it out, come talk to us and get a demo. What we're seeing from clients that are using it is as they start to get used to this new world, we had a quote from one of our new clients who said, it's the first time that she could soap in real time. And I really like hearing things like that. So I like hearing people finding that it is in fact making their workflow better, that it's helping them to spend more time taking care of the animals and less time hitting the Shift-Alt-F1 print screen key. So I think the real thing is come try it out, check it out, see what it's like. It's innovative, it's different. There's a ton of things that we're trying to solve with the software in terms of how we're trying to help. We didn't talk about the innovative things we're doing around SOAP, the way we're trying to tie communications, the way we're trying to make everything a lot easier and tracked and audited and kept together. So I would love for people to take a look and try it out.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, we have to round it up because we kind of have a promise to our listeners of about 20 plus minutes. So two quick questions. One, what is the most recent podcast, TED Talk, book that you read, listened, or saw somewhere that you could recommend to our listeners?
So I am currently reading a book called Entangled Life, and it's about fungi.
Interesting.
And they're really, really cool. It is as close to science fiction as you can imagine. So such incredibly different life form. And I find it utterly fascinating. But I also read a lot of crazy esoteric books. Like I read a book all about eels or foie gras or whatever. And this is yet another one of those kind of super focused books, but really, really interesting. It's called Entangled Life. It's written by a scientist. And I'm learning so many things about how fungi operate that it's just utterly amazing.
Wow.
That's awesome. And then our last question is another innovator in the space that you think we should have on the show.
You should talk to those Talkatoo guys. We
avoid them.
We have a couple of clients that are starting to become mutual clients, and it's kind of interesting. So you should talk to those guys if that's too incestuous of an answer. If you haven't talked with Ben Jacobs, he's got a great overview of the world, and I think he's always a good guy to talk to. And maybe talk to the guys at Fee, who are an innovative dog color company. And what's interesting about those guys is they have been cracking the battery life problem.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.